very physical week of practice, more mental stuff today. So we'll continue the grind, continue to work all the way through the end of the game.
Having them in just shorts and tennis shoes, that seemed to work well for you last week. And is that going to be kind of the plan going forward?
It all depends. We don't just do things to do things. We're always going to look at where our team's at physically. Our numbers are way down, and guys are working hard. So, we got to make sure that we're able to play too, and that we're not just physical. So, it was the right thing to do for this week.
Without getting any specifics of specific guys, are you going in the right direction health-wise as far as players recovering, or is it kind of some get in just that you're going down?
Yeah, I would say the latter of that. We get some back, we lose some, and we're not surprising. We're still low comparable to where we would want to be.
Talk about cleaning up stuff. How much emphasis on the penalty situation Saturday?
Yeah, the decision making in those. We made some really poor decisions, so those have been emphasized, those have been gone over on the film, and making sure that we're not making those same type of mistakes in practice.
How do you balance wanting that much more physical kind of defense and aggressive with tempering those kinds of situations?
Well, I think we've answered that throughout spring and throughout fall by what we've done. We've definitely decided on remaining physical in practice regardless of the numbers for the most part. 20 guys out for the spring game, and a bunch of guys out for the opening game of the year this year. Very unusual, as you look at injury reports for teams who are going to play and where their numbers at. We're at a much different number, so it is what it is. But also glad because I believe it's paid off by how physical we played.
But that's kind of what I mean, because you've instilled this very, the defensive players talk about having the freedom to be very aggressive, and yet you don't want them getting into situations for personal fouls and late hits. So as coaches, how do you kind of get that message across that there's a certain point you can go to?
Well, you can do both. You can play really physical and play smart. And, we had two, I'm not going to get into which was which, but we had two instances last week with hits on the quarterback where one, we weren't as tough on the guy because it was very questionable, could have went either way. And the other one was a very poor decision. So you're going to have, when you play really aggressive, you're going to have some that are right there on the border, and sometimes get called, sometimes don't. We got to avoid the ones that are clear.
Jalen Fitzpatrick, he's been coming along, of course. He only has 3 tight ends. At this point, how much of a gap is there between Randall and Xavier to where he is? Has he really kind of closed that gap to where you can trust him as much as the other two? Obviously, they're a little older than he is. They've been around longer, but where's that comfort level with him out there?
Yeah, Jalen's come along well. Long ways from where he was at. He's not to the level of those guys because they've been here longer and played more. But Jalen's an example of needing everybody. We need everybody on our roster, whether it's the first week or this week or week 8. All these guys are going to end up playing, and a lot of them are going to end up playing in crucial situations, and we've seen that happen over the first couple of games. Guys that are not familiar names, are called upon to make plays.
When you're coming off a big win like you had last week, do you have to
You're the first person to call it that, by the way. Thank you.
Okay. In many ways, I didn't say which ways, but in a lot of ways. Do you have to say anything in terms of guarding against overconfidence? Is that already in their heads? I mean, how do you approach coming off a win like that and coming into a game against a team that could be dangerous for you?
Yeah, I don't think we have an overconfidence issue because we don't have a lot to be confident about. I would not worry about that. What I worry about more is the second part of the question, really the team that we're getting ready to play. And our players understanding that this is a really good team, a very talented team, not just on offense but on defense. And look at their stats, not just this year but last year. These guys have dominated people, and even in the games where they have barely lost against bigger name teams, for the most part they've outplayed them and just had some bad breaks.
Yeah, they've been on the brink of some big wins but weren't quite able to put them away. Is that scary? Is that something that you take into account too?
Well, they've started really fast. You look at first quarter scoring last year. This is a team that really has started fast, and they've had some bad luck too, late in games also, or they would have won those games. But they beat Utah a year ago and had them beat again this year.
Are you seeing much different on film post Gary Anderson? Are they pretty much running the same schemes over there?
Pretty much the same stuff. On offense, really exactly the same stuff. On defense, even though they brought in a defensive coordinator from outside, it seems to be that they're really running the same stuff they had that the assistants knew that he kept there.
The UCLA game is months away, but they had a player yesterday who kind of went on the radio and said some things that your players reacted to, at least on social media. Are you aware of that? And when those kinds of things, if you do become aware of them, do you address it, with your players in any way?
We do a lot of times if it's the week of the game, something like that happening. Kids will be kids, so you can't control everything. And we've had this conversation before, try to shut down all social media. I just don't believe that that's the right thing to do, especially if it's 1 or 2 kids out of 100 kids. So we're worried about this game, this opponent coming up, and we're gonna have to play really well Saturday.
Your quarterback's played in a lot of tough environments in Wisconsin. Do you see him very poised when the crowd gets loud, and played at Auburn too? What have you seen in terms of his decision making?
Really good, and has, as well as he played last year. He's improved this year with his accuracy, with his throwing, really on time. Doesn't get sacked very much. He's a really unique player. To me, he looks a lot like Russell Wilson. He just finds ways to make plays when they're not there.
A kid like that kind of breaks through. I mean, obviously he's a guy who wasn't that highly recruited, but he makes plays, he gets things done. In some ways, is that almost, make you kind of look at recruiting and say, just how exact a science is this? I mean, every school in Texas didn't recruit that guy.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot, and I think people want to know all the time how do guys get missed in high school, and how do premier programs take guys that end up being busts. And I explain it as, that happens in the NFL in the first round. And think of all the resources, all the film of 3 to 4 years with the guys, all the times they can visit them, they can work them out. And we have very limited rules, so it doesn't surprise me that it happens all the time.
So what in your experience is the biggest factor that makes those guys succeed versus the highly rated ones that do wind up failing sometimes?
Well, I think there's so many variables in that. There can be guys playing in systems that don't help them very much, to promote them from the position that they're playing. And sometimes guys can be at smaller high schools. You're still talking about 16-year-old kids. Some completely change, their physical development by the time they're 18. We get kids all the time that we sign, and by the time they get here, have changed already.
You kind of talked to your defense about this is the first, at least statistically, highly ranked offense that they're going to play this year, and what that how they were tested is.
Yeah, I think first off on early statistical rankings, a lot has to do with how well you played in that game. Washington State leads the conference in pass defense, or leads the country in pass defense. We helped them a lot, with that stat. So just like we've played really well on defense, we've hurt people's stats. So I bet those teams are a little better than they show statistically. But you're right, this is the best offense coming in here that we've played. Very dynamic. We're going to have to tackle extremely well. We're going to have to cover because they're really good. There's a reason that they're scoring 50 points a game.
Lane, did you hear the comments from Shaq? And if so, did you have any feeling? What was your first reaction when you did hear that?
Late to the party. We went over that one.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
I didn't have any reaction. We're worried about this week. That's got nothing to do with this week. And kids will be kids. None of that stuff bothers me. I think people get too hung up on, well, this guy said this. They're college kids. Let them be. Who cares? Let them have fun. Thanks. All right.
Talk about Gerald Bowman in this week.
Yeah, it's been a difficult week for Gerald. With a family loss, and so we're here for him. He's been kind of in and out, trying to deal with it, and unfortunately, we go through that a lot. It seems like with our kids, and it's just that our team's really good at being there for each other in these situations, and we've had a lot of guys that have gone through stuff lately that that can help them.